the contemporary Christian concept of giving is inadvertently based on the Old Testament pattern of giving. So what does the Old Testament say about giving? The usual word that's used is the word tithe. Tithing is the way of giving in the Old Testament. Now, let me just very quickly give you a history of tithing to set the stage for what the Old Testament did and how the New Testament is different. Abraham gave a tenth of his war spoils to a man by the name of Melchizedek, and that incident is written again in the book of Hebrews. Jacob promised to give God 10% when God promised covenantal blessings on him at Bethel when he saw that stairway to heaven. Israel gave 10% of their fruits, their seeds, their flocks, and their material belongings to God. The Levites, that were the priestly tribe, gave 10% of whatever they got, they gave to the chief priests. So blessing in the Old Testament was promised for those who gave, and curses were promised for those who didn't. Since the most common number here is 10, we assume and we are taught that 10% is how much we need to give. But when the people of Israel in the Old Testament gave, they didn't give monthly. They gave whenever they had extra flock, or they had a harvest, or they had whatever they got at that time is when they gave. So they didn't give monthly. In fact, when you look at the way they gave, over a 7-year period, they gave between 12 to 14 times. They gave closer to 20% than 10% if you calculate the total of what they gave. Now, the Old Testament was operating on the covenant of works, and the New Testament operates on the covenant of grace. So in the Old Testament, if you do what's right, you will be blessed. If you do what's wrong, you will be cursed. The New Testament operates on the covenant of grace, which says you cannot do anything that's good, so here I am going to give you everything that you need. I'm going to bless you already. So the New Testament, we are just responding to the blessings that God has already given. The New Testament giving is different than the Old Testament giving because we are under a different covenant. In the Old Testament, you gave in order to be blessed. In the New Testament, we give because we are already blessed. And we give not because we have to, not because we are sanctioned to, but because we want to give.